Coaches across the country used the Coachpad this past season to be more efficient with their scout card prep on the weekends as well as when out on the practice field working with their scout teams. Whether you're a coach using a computer program to create cards or drawing them by hand, the Coachpad is for you. Never printing paper or stuffing a binder, clearly seeing scout cards outdoors in the bright sun, and using the coach pad on game days, syncing diagrams from the press box to the sideline were some of the features coaches enjoyed this season. This offseason, get your coach pad at thecoachpad.com to get your program ready for next season. Thecoachpad.com. Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Downbacker podcast. Today we have the head football coach at Oakland High School in Tennessee, Coach Kevin Creasy. Coach, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, especially, at short notice and dealing with this weather that we both have suddenly gotten stuck inside with 0 to negatives outside. So I do appreciate you coming on. Obviously, you've had a lot of success recently at Oakland, but how did you end up as the head coach at Oakland for any of my viewers that may have not seen some of your success?
Well, I guess 27 years ago, I started out as a middle school coach and kind of worked my way up the ranks. First 10 years, I coordinated on the defensive side of the ball, which I thought was really helpful, And when I became a head coach 15 years ago, um, I decided to call plays. I had a guy I could trust that was kind of under me on the defensive side, and I could always help him out. And so I was at a small school, Trousdale County, which is, a powerhouse school in Tennessee. And we won the 2A state championship and the single A state championship in 08, 09. And then 2013, we won it again. But they're used to winning championships there. So it was a big deal for me. But, like I said, they were used to winning, had a great tradition, had great support. And so when I started calling plays, I just kind of ran a lot of things that gave me trouble, over the years, and that I didn't really enjoy seeing. And so that's kind of got me into this wing tee kind of gun under center. We do both, and we've been doing it for a while. And like I said, my first side of the ball was defense, but in '08 I started calling plays, and we went straight to straight into the wing tee and trying to be multiple out of it. And then I got a job at Oakland, which is in 6A, the highest classification here in Tennessee. And we've just taken what we've always done and what we'd always believed in, and kind of moved it over to 6A, and we've been real successful here as well.
Now, with that, that's part of the reason why I have you on, because there's several things about your offense I have some questions about. First, you mentioned you're in a lot from what my understanding of your offense is. So how has your offensive approach changed over that course? Obviously you've gone through an evolution, and you got some under center and shotgun and a bunch of tags and other stuff you can do with it. How and why has that approach evolved over the past almost 20 years?
Well, I tell you, it all started when we were at a small school. We based out of the wing tee and had three running backs, but uh, we had to have answers in case one of those three got hurt. And so we started doing personnel grouping. So we were trying to do the wing tee, out of three backs, which most people do. And we had, success out of it, but we were so thin. The first time we won a state championship, I think we probably had 33 players on the team. And it was one of those deals where, the fourth best running back wasn't as, nowhere as good as the third best. So we just put a pencil to it and really just said, how can we run this offense without scrapping what we believe in? How can we do it with two running backs? And then eventually, how can we do it with one running back? And then we've got into the wildcat. What happens if we lose, our quarterback? What are we going to do then? Our next best quarterback may be good, but oftentimes in single A ball, that guy's just not ready. There's a reason he's the second guy. So, we've gotten into some wildcat. And so little did I know that we were really becoming multiple based off of personnel groupings. And it would be something that I could use even when I had 122 players. I got to Oakland, we had 122. And so we had a lot of depth, but at the same time, we saw what trouble, running the wing tee and combining it with other, we've kind of combined it with different ideologies, whenever we were going with just one major back, we stole a lot from the I formation. And then, of course, my last few years on the defense side of the ball, our offense was up tempo, on the ball, check with me, spread offense. And so we got into the gun and that sort of thing. So we've combined like three different ideologies into one, in which it has answers for when there's injuries. And that was the biggest thing. That's what really got us into changing around and finding different ways, to run the wing tee and at least have wing tee base blocking rules, stuff like that. And you see more of that in college. You don't see a lot of guys running the wing tee, under center with three running backs and that sort of thing. But I promise you, if you flip it on, you'll see guys that are going to run, buck sweep. And they may do it with two H backs. And that's kind of what we've gotten into over the years, especially whenever we have one guy that's just, head and shoulders above everybody else.
So that goes to my next question. With you being able to do the three ideologies essentially in one, and having to be prepared to adjust. Okay, if my quarterback goes down, I got to do this. How do you organize your practices to deal with all those personnel packages? Because obviously, I mean, the block. I get like obviously a lot of it's window dressing. Like your blocking schemes are staying the same, and that's the old adage about like the old Jim Tressel. Like he'll run power 7 straight plays in a row if it's working, but he'll just change the formation.
Right.
It's how do you make sure you have enough time and simplify your stuff, mainly practice wise? How do you structure your practice to make sure you're hitting on those personnel groupings and making sure everything is good to go?
Yeah, that's a great question because, uh, you know, I've been asked that before. They're like, how long does some of your practices last if you got all this stuff in? Well, it does last a pretty good while. We spend a lot of time at practice, but at the same time, everything builds off of what we initially learn in the spring. In Tennessee, we get, basically 10 to 12 practices in the spring in a 3 week period. And a lot of times we may have some guys that are playing baseball or running track. So we may not have everyone, but we put our base stuff in, during that 3 weeks in the spring, in which we get 10 to 12 practices, and then we get a scrimmage if we choose to, uh, which is always pretty cool. But then in June we turn right back around, and we do weights and conditioning probably like everyone else, but our conditioning is really on the offensive side of the ball. It's really installing our offense, and so we have 3 weeks in June, and then we have a mandatory dead period the end of June and the first week of July. So all throughout June, when we're in helmets, we can't really uh, do a lot of competition, as far as running the ball and that sort of thing. We can do some throwing and perimeter stuff, uh, but we're kind of limited just being in helmets, and so that's when we really start to put in our multiple formations, our shifts, our trades. We've got all our motions. The funny part is we were running a red zone play. I think third round of the playoffs. Hadn't ran it all year, but I remember we put the motion in. It was a unique kind of motion that kind of hides the guy that's going across the formation and slips him out the backside. We had put that in June. Now we've practiced it. That was our kind of our 2 point play, and we ended up running it on fourth down in the red zone in the playoffs. So it's just funny how that thing that you're putting in June may show up in November, and that's kind of we've kind of always had, uh, this procedural install in which we know what we got to have in by the time our first weekend pads comes around. Now, our first weekend pads, we're mostly working blocking and tackling like you're supposed to. But all the little intricacies of our offense, we feel like we've got a nice little 5 to 6 week window in summer and 2 to 3 week window in the spring to kind of get it put in and at least get the players to learn, why certain things are called certain things and why we do certain things a certain way. And so everything kind of builds off of it. If you watch this week 1 and 2, it's a whole lot easier to defend us than maybe the first week or two of the playoffs.
Okay. Now with that, like continuing to build, you mentioned you pulled something out that you installed back in June that you sparsely practiced, but it wasn't like on the forefront. How do you game plan with so many formations, or what are you looking for film wise? Like obviously with being whether you're gun wing T, under center wing T, any type of wing based offense, I'll phrase it that way. You're going to get occasionally not what you see on film. Let's just call spade a spade. Like you're going to get you always get those 1 or 2 teams a year that are just going to give you dumb stuff that completely change their defense because they think it's going to work. But like generally, how are you deciding? Okay, we have all these formations, shifts, traits, motions. How are you evaluating film you're seeing and playing it, or do you just don't care and like we're going to run these formations, see what they give us, and this will have us build on it? How are you game planning all the personnel packages?
That's a great question. I think it's kind of twofold. One, it goes back to when I was on the defensive side of the ball. How much time did I spend trying to defend someone uh, who ended up, trading a tight end? You know, at the end of the day, I had to have answers from the defensive side of the ball. So I felt like, one part of our offensive philosophy is let's not make it easy on the defense. If I just lined up and, the traditional 100 set, the Delaware wing tee, and I feel like a defensive coach can just kind of line up and on their side and say, all right, to the weak side, they got belly, they got speed sweep, to the tight end side, they got trap, G, and buck. I don't want to make it easy on the defensive coordinator. And then essentially, it's still 16, 17-year-olds that are out there that are making the checks and the calls. So I want to make it a little difficult on them. So I do feel like on one side of it, I'm going to try to do my best to kind of make those guys work throughout the week. Maybe they spend more time on alignment than they do, block destruction and tackling that week. So that might help us in the long run. And then at the same time, we do a thorough study of guys and see what their philosophy is on defense and where we can put maybe a player in conflict. Maybe put a couple guys in a dilemma where they've got to be a force player or a flat defender or something like that. And then of course we look and see what other people have done to kind of give those guys trouble. So uh, ultimately, like you said, guys can still junk up a defense and try to throw whatever they can at you, and that kind of goes back, to the name of your podcast. We tell our guys from the middle school on, our sixth graders are running our offense. Ultimately, you've got a rule, maybe gap down backer, but at the same time, they feel confident with their rule. Once they know the rule, it doesn't matter what kind of defense they see in front of them. They may not be able to execute it, but they're able to figure out what exactly they're supposed to do. And so that's why we really enjoy running what we do. A lot of our concepts are, wing tee based. And, you talk about Coach Tressel. That's where we get a lot of the eye stuff from is we feel like power and counter a lot of times are ran really well out of eye. And then what we see on Saturdays and Sundays, those guys are doing a ton of it out of the gun and with their quarterbacks. And so that's kind of what we're doing too is, we hate being pigeonholed into just somebody saying, Oh, they're the wing tee. At the end of the day, that was at the uh, end of the world wars when they were running that offense. Well, we kind of like that fact because a lot of the people that defended it are no longer around, and it's so old that it's new again. You know what I'm saying? It's so old that it's new again. But then at the same time, we're able to run a lot of these things out of formations and sets that people are seeing on Saturdays and Sundays, and so all those armchair quarterbacks and all those Monday morning coaches are sitting there saying, I see this stuff ran on Saturdays and Sundays. So, it's kind of a modernized wing tee for some of these people to kind of evaluate and give their opinions on. So, it's twofold. It's one where we love the fact that, a lot of people that have answers to this stuff have retired or gone away. And then also we like the fact that a lot of stuff they're seeing in modern, college football or professional football, they see in our offense as well.
Okay. Now I want to move on to one of my. I mean, because I don't have many questions for you, and you're doing a great job at just like giving me in-depth answers, as it's marking off a lot of the other stuff I have. But how do you handle all this on game days? So your call sheet or what you're trying to do doesn't look like an NFL call sheet, to where it's like a. I mean, I saw Mike McCarthy's play call sheet from the Cowboys game this past weekend against the Packers, and the things like this tall, like this wide, and I'm just like I get you're paid full time and paid obscenely nice to play football at that level. I understand that, but at the same time, that looks like a little much just to me personally. I get it though. Um, how do you make sure that okay, whoever you're subbing in and out for packages is organized and where they need to be? How do you make sure again your call sheet doesn't look like I mean a full size brochure like you look like you're a tourist in like Europe? Um, so how do you manage your game day?
Well, I don't have a Mike McCarthy call sheet. I don't have call sheet envy or anything like that. But my call sheet is pretty detailed, and I can't lie. I'm guilty of putting all kinds of things on my call sheet. I spend a great amount of time, and I don't know if that's because I've got a little uh, paranoia in me, or I've found a lot of new and improved ways to lose ball games. But I've spent a great deal over the years kind of getting my call sheet together. Uh, Matter of fact, I saw my call sheet yesterday. It's in the floorboard of my truck where I threw it after our last ball game. So sometimes it works out great, and sometimes it's not so good. But um, I think with all that we do, I think you got to put a lot of detail into your call sheet. I've been accused of the call sheet that I use that correlates with the wristband that we use. Some of our plays get kind of wordy, 9, 10 words. And so I don't want to send a 16-year-old that just got knocked into the bench over there on the sideline in with a foreign language that he's got to give to somebody in 25 seconds and run a play. So we've tried to make it easy on the quarterbacks, the guys that are calling the plays, and it correlates with our wristband, what our play calls are. So it does. It takes an extreme amount of time, and I've got some good assistants that help double check and make sure that things are in sync with each other. And then of course it helps me kind of during the week, during the practice week, it helps me as far as scripting what we want to see practice wise. So I can't lie. I've got a play sheet that's double sided, and then I've got a little cheat sheet that's a normal size sheet of paper, and so if you look at me, I kind of look like I got a Waffle House menu strapped onto my belt loop. So yeah, it's a whole lot smaller at the beginning of the season, and then it grows, and there's certain things that are always going to be on there, and there's certain things that we have found that we like that we don't want to forget about and that we don't want to lose, especially situationally. There's certain, um, like for example, first and extra long. There's certain things that we get a holding call or we get a dumb penalty on first down. You know, what are you going to call on first and 20? You know, we know we're probably not getting 20 yards And then we're probably also not running our drive starter plays or our 1st and 10 plays, but we are trying to get back to second manageable. So those first and extra longs on our call sheet are going to be, uh, a lot of the same plays all year long. So yeah, I'm guilty as anybody else is of maybe having too many plays, but it's really not as difficult as you might think because, like I said, with our rules and our way in which we practice concepts, we just tie things together. When we go like 12 personnel, we may have a tight end and an H back on one side, and we can run just our regular down, our G, um, with a down kick, and then bobbing on a backer. But then on the other side, we may have two wide receivers, like true receivers, in which we can run our two-man concepts, which we've been running since the spring. We try to perfect in June when we're doing some 7-on-7s and stuff like that. So we don't want to, like I said, pigeonhole ourselves into, just a ram our head against the wall 100% run team. We're able to have concepts in which we can have an option to run on one side of the ball and then throw on the other, and vice versa. So with that, you got to have this thing scripted out. You got to have this thing easily communicated, and you got to have time to practice all of it. And so, like I said, we've got a lot of good assistant coaches that put in a lot of time to help me with that. And then, of course, with practice, they're kind of singing off the same sheet of music. You know what I mean? They understand it conceptually, and then of course they understand how to teach it, and I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to kind of hit on that. Like, do you ever? I mean, just as you're doing it, I mean, just to build off that question, I'll phrase it this way. I don't know how much you change personnel going in and out with all this stuff you do, but when you do have to do that, where do you try to keep them sideline wise in proximity to you, or does and our coach in charge of that part?
Yeah, they're going to stay close to their position coaches. Their position coaches are going to stay pretty close to me, but as long as we all got the headsets on, they're working, everything's good. We've got that one line that kind of is the coach's box, and then right behind that, we'll have our assistant coaches with their players, that are going in that certain personnel around them. And then, of course, we've got another line in which everybody else stands behind. And so we've never had any trouble with it. The only tricky part is now with huddle sideline and replay systems and stuff like that. We've kind of got the tent set up with the TVs, and our monitors are showing our defense what's going on while we have the ball. Every year we have a couple guys that are two-way players, and so we got to make sure that those guys are always ready to roll in case we call their number. So the two-way players are the only ones that are kind of in a hairy situation in which they got to be two places at once, and we have a coach responsible for that. Because those guys, obviously, they're pretty special players, or they wouldn't be on both sides of the ball, especially in a school of like 2,000.
Yeah. Um, my last real question, you mentioned on there about your play call sheet kind of just growing. I mean, obviously, it's very easy to add formations, tags, motions, shifts as the season goes on and build off what you're already doing. Because, like I said, I mean, you might have a tag here or there that alters your run game a little bit, but really you're running the same stuff just out of a bunch of different things because you're trying to get levers, numbers, all that lovely stuff. Is there any what kind of causes you to take stuff off the sheet or not? Like put it in an area where like I I know it's not gonna be labeled this, but like an area on your call sheet where probably not going to use, but there in case of an emergency. Like, what kind of causes you to is it to make those altercations, or is there anything that makes you adjust your play call sheet that way?
Yeah, a lot of times um, we may have planned to use a certain shift or motion for a week and never got to it. And if we never got to it, then a lot of times we may just keep it around until we see something similar later in the season. You know, we put in a lot of time on certain shifts and motions, and we don't want to, just practice something that we don't use. And then our guys have a great ability to recall information uh, as long as we spend time practicing it. So it may be a shift or a motion that we didn't call on the week that we thought we were going to call, but we're going to keep it on the practice script just so, most importantly, they know, they remember uh, the uh, the shift or the motion or what have you. And unique formations. A lot of times we have those toward the bottom of the call sheet. Only having to pull them out when we feel like we need to. There's oftentimes an opportunity where you may have to pull something out, and things are getting definitely hairy. So we've done that before, but we've got them labeled down at the bottom of the call sheet. And then there's certain things that you want on film. There's certain things that you want opponents to see. You want to make sure that they understand that you got the ability to do these things. It may be some kind of unbalanced. We're always going to run some type of uh, unbalanced formation. And, we feel like it does give us a numbers advantage, but then also we do feel like it makes the other team have to work. And, there's always the ability to throw to a tackle that's eligible and that sort of thing. There's always the ability to kind of shift back and get into a normal formation. There's always the ability to shift and get into that unbalanced formation. And by unbalanced, I don't just mean like end over, like wide receiver covering up a tight end. I mean, we may move a tackle over. We may put an extra lineman in the game. There may be two tight ends in the game, and we end up going 4-by-2 unbalanced. So there's a lot of different things as long as we keep our rules that we can add and like I said, give those guys that are trying to junk up a defense a lot to think about, because ultimately, if somebody's inventing a defense for you over a week, over a 5-day span, then we feel like we can rely on our blocking rules and maybe even our formations to kind of get them in a bind. And a lot of times, the answer is no, we really don't want to junk up a defense because they do so much. There's so many different ways that they can out leverage us, outnumber us, get angles on us, and put their best guys in position to succeed. So a lot of times, those guys are kind of talked out of it just because of just the number of different ways that we can get into a different play. And like I said, ultimately, it's kind of a chess game. Uh, Sometimes it's a freaking checkers game, and the other guy's checkers are just bigger than yours, and it doesn't matter what you do. They're able to jump any direction they want to, and that's when you got your work cut out for you. And that call sheet, it cuts down to about the size of an index card because there's only a few things that can work.
Yep, I think we've all been there at some point, coach, where it's just like, yeah, my options are limited. So, but that is what that is. I mean, yeah. So yeah, coaches, give coach a follow on Twitter. All that stuff will be in the bio as normal. Like give coach a follow if you want to get in depth with scheme stuff. You can easily hit up coach. I know coach gladly talks to coaches all the time, and I know he did a lot of stuff during Zoom because like one of my buddies recommended I have him on, and as I've done my research, these were kind of more my direction because like scheme's great, but like how do you get in personnel packages, why, and how you teach all that? It's kind of a little more, I mean, vastly important to me right now, at least personally. Like, share, subscribe, all that lovely BS. Please do, because I mean, as I'm filming this, we're super close to 5,000 subscribers. That, and also when I look at data, because I'm bored and I'm a business nerd, most of the people who watch aren't subscribed. So subscribe. It helps people find the channel. And check our sponsor, Coachpad. Otherwise, that's another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.